adaptively and not fall into a sense of being overwhelmed. Now, key to this, and this is kind of my overarching framework of where I want to put this entire presentation today, is on the slide in front of you, you should see a weird drawing of a hand. Now, that's the work of Daniel Siegel. He is a neuropsychologist, I think, but he's a pretty brainy guy. And essentially what he's explaining there is how our brain works. And I'll help you link into why this is relevant here. But essentially, you can probably see here, on my hand, what he talks about is over here, we've got the most ancient brain, the most primitive part of brain, right? And the hand being the metaphor for the brain. Now, that's our lizard brain or our brain stem. So that's responsible for waking, sleeping cycles, and it's responsible for consciousness, unconsciousness, and temperature regulation. So stuff that is way outside our conscious control, but that's what's happening in there. Then we've got the mammalian brain or the limbic system, that's the thumb that I'm crossing over here. And this is responsible for the big emotions, right? So this is where fight, flight, freeze come from. This is where anger, joy, that's all happening in this really powerful limbic system over here. And that's also pretty old as well. Then overlaying that, when all goes well with our brains and in our lives, we've got the front cortex, which is made up of a few parts of the brain, but you know, I'm not a brainy person in that sense, so I'm not going to be getting into the details there. But essentially, this is sort of the wise part of our brain. This is where our thinking, our problem solving, our ability to think logically and rationally is all housed in this front part of the brain. And as humans, we have probably the most unique front part of our brain, the most developed, the biggest, although sometimes you wouldn't say that, as I'm sure we've all seen footage of people in the shopping aisles. Maybe there wasn't so much front brain going on there. But essentially, when all is going well in life, so pre-COVID-19, pre-pandemic, we are tracking along, and for most of the time, this system is joined up together, and it's talking, the different parts are talking to each other without us even being aware of it, and we've got it all nicely packaged, and this thinking part of our brain is able to kind of soothe and regulate this really emotional limbic part of our brain. So when it gets a little bit jarred, this part almost gives it a hug, if you want to think of it like that, and settles it down and says, look, we don't have to worry about that. We're okay, we're coping, things like that. So normally we're going along like that. We might have the odd blip, for example, when we perceive our partner taking advantage of us or by not washing the dishes one night, then this guy might light up a little bit and we have a quick flip up and then it comes back. Now, Dan Siegel talks about that. What happens when we're really pressurized or we perceive that we're really threatened is we flip our lid, right? And that basically means the wise part of our brain, the wise leader, goes offline and we get overtaken by the big emotions like anger, fear, anxiety. They all get triggered off by a big alarm center, and there's all parts of the brain that are involved with that. And this, interestingly, actually even receives less blood flow when we're in that state, because the blood flow actually tends to go to our arms and legs, our extremities, so that we can fight harder or run harder, right? So you might be asking, that's nice, Gillian, these are nice pictures of hands, but how does this fit in? And essentially, to get a sense of when we feel threatened, that is when we're more likely to flip our lid. Now, at the moment, we're in a position where we've got the COVID-19 pandemic. Physical distancing has been implemented. Then there were further isolation measures. Then there were closures of schools and workplaces. And essentially, the very material of what made up our daily life began to be dismantled. So it affected what we love to do, where we want to be, and who we want to be with. And everything that was familiar to us very suddenly and quite brutally was dismantled. And it is absolutely, the mental health consequences of that are significant and undeniable. In fact, the World Health Organization acknowledges that the mental health consequences from the pandemic are going to be a significant aspect of what we're going to be dealing with during as well as after. I feel like I'm flying a little blind, so I have a tendency to speak really fast, and I'm not getting any, no one's able to say to me, slow down. So Jackie, please feel free to let me know to slow down, or if there's any confusion. So essentially just to dig down a little bit more into what's going on. And I'm sure that some of you sitting there will be able to kind of recognize some of what you're seeing on the screen in front of you. But in terms of what helps our brain to feel connected and to be able to hug and comfort that emotional limbic part is when we can predict what's going to happen, when we feel safe, when we feel that life is going along just as it should. When those things are threatened or removed from us, we immediately go into a state of being at risk of flipping our lid. So some of the things that we're facing are adaptations to our very lifestyle. So having to work from home, having to homeschool. I don't know about anyone else, but I'm personally terrified about that, right? I've got 2 children. I have always been eternally grateful that I can drop them off at school and leave them to the school professionals to educate them. The idea of me having to now corral them and get them to do their work leaves me somewhat terrified. Things that have been noticed is that by working from home more, yes, there are advantages to that, but actually what we're seeing is people feeling that they have to be constantly switched on. They're talking about just kind of, they notice they're working longer and harder, whether that's about trying to justify that, yes, I'm working, or it's difficult to blur, difficult to separate, like I've left work and now I'm home and I'm going to be just the mom or here at home on my own and do home things. We tend to find ourselves working later into the night. And then we found ourselves having to attend to both domestic and work occupational tasks simultaneously. So I don't know about you guys, but I've been in Zoom meetings and I'm having a meeting and one of my children will come along and ask me a maths related question. And that would never happen when I'm at my workplace. And so that's really stressful of having to play all my roles at once. And I've certainly seen it with my colleagues while we're having Zoom meetings, that we've all got many hats on at the same time. So the very adaptation of our living circumstances has come under threat. Then there's the fear and uncertainty we're living with. I can certainly relate for myself. One of the things that I've been really grappling with is just give me an end date, right? And just noticing that that's the human brain that says, I can almost put up with things, but if you just tell me for how long. So something that's really difficult in this situation is we don't know how long we're going to be under these circumstances. We don't know, are they going to be lifted gradually? Are they going to become more restrictive? And that's very difficult for our brain to deal with. And if we think about that in terms of our brain's development, dealing with uncertainty is really the kryptonite for human beings. Uncertainty means risk, it means danger. And so when things are really uncertain, then we have a much more high likelihood of flipping that lid. So some of the uncertainties we're dealing with is sickness for ourselves and others, worrying, have we perhaps made others unwell? We're worrying about elderly parents, people who are expecting new babies. There's so much pressure on our minds here. We're having to make decisions in a really short amount of time with limited information as well. So things like, am I going to go to that doctor's appointment? What's the best thing to do? Do I make it a telehealth appointment? What am I allowed to do? So lots of mental load. I've addressed the length of time in isolation, and then really significantly, the economic impact. So just the uncertainty around work loss or reduction in work, the uncertainty about studies, will they continue? What will we do? Relationships, I was reading a really interesting article recently on what about people who were starting out in relationships and now they have to make a decision, do we move in together? Or do we just not talk to each other and maybe we pick up on this later? And for those who are living at home with families and partners already, basically what we're seeing is the average was the statistics show us in the week we were spending around 2.5 hours a day with our partners. For some of us, that's gone up to 15 to 16 hours a day. That is a lot of time. And so there's going to be cracks and fractures happening in relationships, because not only are you spending more time together, but you've got far more stresses and uncertainty around you. And then another major threat for the human mind that it will see is the perception of losing control. So I don't know about any of you, but like, I didn't sign up for this, right? And I'm pretty sure none of us have ever longed to live in a situation like this. So, you know, there's a major part of this being enforced upon us. We have lost a sense of agency, especially in the country we're privileged enough to live in. We're used to going where we want, when we want. And so there's a lot for our mind to adjust to. So just looking at those three key sort of themes, that's an enormous pressure on our brain that's telling our brain, you're in danger, this isn't okay, we don't like this. And when our brain gets that signal, it says, I need to protect you, right? And one of the ways that it protects us is historically by flipping the lid and giving us those survival instincts of fight, flight, or freeze. Now, in this situation, we're not needing to grapple with a tiger or a lion. We're grappling with something that we actually can't escape. And so the fight, flight, or freeze can actually be counterproductive rather than something that could be really useful. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about just now is about how to keep that frontal cortex looking after and moderating that limbic fight, flight, freeze part so that we can get ourselves through this crisis without completely freaking out and running down the street screaming. So just to dig down even further then into those stresses, how we're seeing them start to become apparent in people. So we've got immediately a reduced social novelty. We are used to going out, having coffee with multiple different people in a week, picking, you know, what we're going to do at gym or whether we're going to go for a run and who with, what movies we're going to go see. So we've got boredom as well. And with boredom comes fatigue. We actually become less productive, even though we've got more time on our hands. So it can be really tricky to kind of keep the momentum going. Of course, we're seeing immense amounts of loneliness. This is incredibly challenging this time, not only for people living at home with others in relationships, but absolutely for people who are living alone, who are now feeling even more isolated. We've also, we're watching homesickness come about, that, you know, people are missing connecting with their elderly parents on the weekends. We've got students who are unable to see family members who might be dotted around the country. We've got friends being split up from each other. So lots and lots of interpersonal challenges. Claustrophobia, cabin fever, absolutely. Getting stuck inside, you know, getting really sick and tired of seeing our own four walls. Feeling very disconnected, and that's something that I can certainly relate to, even in my work with the team that I work with at UQ. It's a fantastic team, but I sometimes feel like, is anyone out there? Are we still working on anything? Even though we're all working along in our own little boxes, it has definitely felt sometimes like, is the world still spinning while I'm still in here? So feeling really quite disconnected from it all and a bit lost. All of this comes together to produce immense mental strain. So if you think about your brain kind of having, you know, there's the analogy of the spoons. You wake up in the morning, you've got 6 spoons of energy to give. This, you know, and you go through the day and you might give 1 spoon to helping your children with homework, and you might give 1 spoon to making dinner. This experience that we're going through is taking a large chunk of those spoons, holding that anxiety, that uncertainty in your mind burns energy. And so what we might be finding is we just don't have any spoons left over at the end of the day for much else. So we might find ourselves being particularly snappy or quieter or less productive. And all of that then starts to express itself in other ways. So we might be seeing, or we're certainly seeing in different groups, disruptive sleep-wake cycles. So people aren't out of their usual routine. They might be getting less sleep or less sleep when it matters at the best times of night. And all of that then contributes. We start seeing things like depression, we start seeing anxiety. If there was a mental health condition there before, we might see it somewhat aggravated or even exacerbated. And then, of course, we're dealing with all this stuff. We've got so few spoons left of the day. We're going to see more conflict. And conflict takes more spoons, and we might not have any spoons. And then we might have to go to the bank of spoons and go into debt and just start to feel like we're struggling to keep our heads above water. So I hope as you're kind of looking at this slide here, that you're able to look at this and maybe some of this resonates with you and you go, yes, that's me. And the reason I want to do this is not to go, oh my goodness, this is awful, this is too much. It's first of all to say, responding in this way is completely normal and adaptive to an absolutely abnormal situation. So it's really important not to pathologize what you're going through. It would be strange if you were thrilled and skipping through the streets, although you wouldn't be allowed to skip through the streets, but skipping around your garden. These responses are your brain struggling to come to terms with what's happening around you. But we don't have to just sit and let it sort of deepen and get worse. We need to sit, we need to acknowledge it, we need to make some space for ourselves and go, yeah, this is hard. I'm dealing with some really difficult stuff. I have never done this before. I need to remove the expectations off myself. And I need to give myself a little bit of space and time to adapt. So to kind of sum it up, flipping the lid, it's going to happen more frequently because essentially we've got more stresses than we've ever had before. Our regular coping strategies are largely unavailable. So coffee with friends, going to a movie, going to the gym, whatever it might be, going to your yoga studio and having a good chat with everyone, those are gone largely. They might have adapted, but in their usual way, they're gone. So what we start seeing is that small triggers can lead to a bigger emotional impact because we're flipping the lid more quickly because we've got less reserves. And then we see that impact on mental health. So it's not all doom and gloom, right? So I think very importantly is first acknowledging and allowing that this is hard, I don't like this, and I don't have to be coping so wonderfully. But something really hopeful out of this is that we're not flying completely blind. We have some information, some guidance that comes from other people who have lived under conditions of isolation and restriction before. But saying that, I want to make a really clear caveat here. Okay, so we're talking here about what we call ICE settings. That's isolated, confined, extreme environments. But something really important to remember here is that people who work in those environments choose to work in those environments. Now, I don't know about you, but I am not an astronaut. I'm not a polar scientist. I don't like the cold. I'm on an oil rig worker. I'd be a liability out there. But so for most of us, this is not something we've chosen. The other thing to remember is people who pursue those types of careers are often really wired to find that attractive. For example, they have a really uncanny ability to not flip their lid. They've got a really good ability to keep that frontal cortex talking to and soothing that emotional part of themselves. And they also undergo years of training to hone that skill, right? So, I don't think there's too many polar scientists and submariners in this group, but maybe they are, and that's fantastic, and I'd love to hear from you. But for most of us, we aren't coming into this as prepared as these people were. And a lot of them come from a background of things like being a fighter jet pilot and things like that, where they are really good at keeping their cool under stress. But that aside, there's a lot we can learn from them. So from these expeditions and living on the International Space Station, we have been able to glean what works for mental health in those situations, because certainly in the last couple of decades, focus on mental health in those ICE situations has become more of a priority. So some of the similar stresses that we're experiencing with these groups is that we need to adapt to unusual and constantly changing conditions, certainly in those first couple of weeks of isolation and restriction. Every couple of days there was a new cabinet meeting. Every couple of days there were new rules. And it was just a constant sense of, oh, I can't catch my breath. I can't figure out what I'm supposed to do next and what I'm not allowed to do anymore. In those settings, just like with us, they cope with a sense of threat, danger, and uncertainty. There's periods of monotony and boredom. We get low mood and motivation. We have to tolerate being in close proximity to a small number of other people, and we're separated from friends and family for a long time. So a lot of similarities there that you can see, yeah, okay, we're in a little bit of an ice situation here, being isolated, confined, and in an extreme environment. And for us, that's being a pandemic that none of us have really lived through before. So from this then, we've learned a little bit about, oh, what works, okay? And I'm trying to keep an eye on the time here, okay? I've tried to distill a little bit the key findings about what works. And I really want to couch this in the caveat that it's really important not to put more pressure on yourselves to do more and do more and do more and walk out of this experience enlightened and self-actualized and having experienced a spiritual awakening. This experience has been thrust on us. Now, if you do come out enlightened and self-actualized and awakened, that's wonderful, but that would be unusual. For most of us, it's about surviving this as intact as possible and as well as possible mentally and physically. We do not need to come out of here have learned how to play the clarinet and the oboe and speak 3 languages. This is not the time for that. When, you know, there's something that those people in those ice situations do is they might do that, but they have prepared for that and they have chosen that. And so they are in a different mental state. But certainly for most of us who are just struggling to adapt, it's not the time to put pressure on ourselves to learn new skills, to be super mum, to cut our children's lunch into the shape of their names. Now's not the time, right? And if you're following those people on social media, just, you know, mute them, delete them. You don't need to be putting extra pressure on yourselves right now. So just basically, what works for these astronauts, these submariners? First of all, understanding and allowing yourself that it takes up to 10 days to adjust to a new situation. Now, I actually read up on that around the time this initially began, because I was seeing a lot of my patients struggling with it. And that information ended up being so helpful for myself, being able to remind myself, of course I'm struggling. I mean, I remember for a couple of weeks, my brain felt bruised. I felt like I was constantly getting whiplash, like I was in the car with a learner driver, because I just felt like I was constantly having to change direction and getting more information and having to change the way I lived. And when I would remind myself, oh, of course this is hard, because I'm never even getting 7 to 10 days to adapt. I'm getting 3 days and they're changing it again. So when we understand that, and certainly for astronauts and expeditioners, when they understand that, they can then be prepared that they're not going to feel okay for a while, but they also know that that will adapt and that will change. So it won't feel this awful forever. Another thing that I kind of touched on earlier is that balance between optimism and realism. There's a lot on social media about this is a time to, you know, really go inwards and embrace yourself and do the thing you've been waiting to do. That is wonderful for those of us who can do that. But it's also really hard, unspeakably hard, and really scary. And if all we've done today is get up, brush our hair, brush our teeth, and we eat pretty well, we keep hydrated, and we get some work done, that's more than enough. Right? So not feeling the guilt or the pressure on yourself that you've somehow got to become the Martha Stewart of the pandemic. You can just be you and get through the basics. So something key in those extreme situations that they find helps people is establishing a basic routine. Okay, and I really want to keep it basic, and I think I've included a slide here that has a basic structure. And the reason I like it, it seems more aimed at children, but I think it's easily adaptable to each of our lives. I like it because of how fluid it is and how non-specific it is. But the things that giving ourselves a basic structure does is it creates a sense of control, It reduces some of the uncertainty that's within our remit to reduce. But then within that, it's really important to be gentle with ourselves. So if you get through 3/4 of the day and you're just really exhausted and you feel like you need to just take a minute and, you know, maybe lie on the sofa and relax, then absolutely that's what you do for that day, and you swap that out in your routine. So if we just have a look at this example of this sort of schedule, and this is just something I found out on the internet that I saw a couple of weeks ago, and it really appealed to me that it had basic blocks of time, it had nice variety involved, but wasn't too stringent, wasn't too prescriptive. And as you can see there, lots of time for things like creative pursuits, getting some fresh air, food being put in there, but also making sure we're getting enough sleep. So I think that's kind of a nice idea of what to be following. But, you know, even in my own life, I don't really follow everything there. Mine's probably got bigger chunks where I give myself some space to just see how I'm feeling. Some days I'm more productive than others, and that's okay. I give myself a bit of grace. So the next thing that we know is really important in these situations is limiting the threat and uncertainty. So the more messages of threat and uncertainty that you're bombarding your brain with, the more this smoke alarm system starts to beep and go off and says, we're in danger, and we're going to flip our lid, and we're going to lose that ability to think rationally and logically and problem solve and stay calm. So some really simple tips in this situation is limiting your exposure to the news. Now, I know that can be really tricky because in some ways it helps us to feel connected, but the constant bombardment of the headlines, the red scrolling tape, the talking people, it triggers our brain that we're in danger. So things like don't keep the news on in the background on the TV, just turn it off. Put on some SBS chill or some music that you really enjoy. Be selective about the news sources that you do go to. So avoid the websites that are getting paid per click, because obviously their headlines are going to be more sensationalized. And you know, when you actually click on and read the article, it's not half as terrible as the headline would make you believe. So, you know, websites like Reuters or The Guardian, things like that, which are just a little bit sort of tend to stick more to the objective facts and steer away from the sensationalism behind it. And that also goes to talking about it, right? It's okay to not want to talk about these things with our friends when we catch up. And you can actually say, hey, let's catch up on Zoom this evening. Let's talk about everything but coronavirus, right? Because the more we talk about it, the more stressed and anxious we also get as well. That's not to say don't talk about it at all, but talk about it with safe people. Another thing that's really important to kind of keeping that front brain online is activities that help us to stay in the present. So, and I'm going to touch on this a little bit just now, but breathing exercises, and I'll give you some ideas for apps that are really good for that. Yoga, meditation, you don't have to become a yogi all of a sudden, but even doing 1 minute of deep breathing at the start of the day, that deep breath actually communicates directly with this emotional center here, and it lets it know it's okay. We're not in danger, stand down, and it lets the lid come back down. So that's why breathing works. Small things like breaking down the tasks in front of us into smaller chunks. You know, if we look at, oh my goodness, I've got to get through 3 months of this, and I'm not saying that it is going to be 3 months. I don't know about you, but I just felt my heart rate rise as I said that. But if I kind of just say, I'm just getting to Friday, and all I have to do between now and Friday is do my job, see my patients, eat, and if I exercise twice this week, I'm winning. And then I might break that down further into what am I just doing this morning. So this morning I'm doing this presentation, and then I'm going to have a lovely cup of tea afterwards and sit on the deck and listen to some birds. That might be as far as I'm going to take my brain. Those are some of the strategies that the astronauts and the expeditioners use to help their brain not become overwhelmed and flip out. So in terms of addressing monotony, which of course is an issue, and this is really interesting, Ernest Shackleton on his expedition, they used to do drama together in the evening. So they would do vaudeville and things like that. So I'm not suggesting we all become actors and actresses, but certainly engaging in some creative pursuits from that part of our brain can be very rewarding during a time like this. So everything that I have put up here, I'm not getting any kickback for recommending them. They're actually things that I've used myself, or I recommend to my patients, and that I'm quite familiar with them, and actually have found them immensely useful. So things like this little dog icon at the top is a yoga app called Down Dog. And they have actually, in response to COVID-19, they've offered free membership until the 31st of May. And it's a wonderful thing where you can literally log on, you pick the style of yoga you want. So I love yin yoga, which is basically you lie down and you stretch and breathe. And it's very peaceful and you don't do much at all. That appeals to me, but you can pick the voice of the person who takes you through the class. You can pick how long you want the activity to be. So if it's 5 minutes, 1 minute, 30, 60 minutes, and you can pick what level, beginner, intermediate, advanced. So just incorporating something like that 2 or 3 times a week helps to just kind of give you something different to do. If you love your exercise and your high intensity interval training, I'd recommend WOD Roulette. Every day they spit out a different body weight sort of workout you can do and get that heart rate pumping. If you want to take up running, or you've always, you think to yourself going for a run or a walk would be good for you, and certainly it is, getting out into nature, getting out of the house, getting some fresh air, then things like the app that Couch to 5K takes you step by step with the community, learning how to increase your fitness in a safe, research-based way. So, and then other things to kind of do is have breaks from screen time, have breaks from social media, rediscover board games, maybe do something creative or artistic, get some little modeling clay, and maybe you and the kids sit in the evening once a week and each make a dog. You set a task. What are we going to make? We're going to make a flamingo tonight, and have a go at making flamingos together. So any of those artistic, creative things are immensely therapeutic for our brains. Reading, of course, is lovely, and then listening to music. And if you're lucky enough, you're someone who can play an instrument, playing music absolutely is very soothing, very healing for us. So these are all really therapeutic pursuits that not only break up the monotony, but can really help soothe and comfort and give a bit of a hug to that overstretched limbic system at the moment. So just a brief word on taking care of your mind. This is really important right now. And some of the strategies that they use in these international space stations, for example, is using breathing practices. So for that, I'd really recommend, there's quite a few lovely apps, but a few that I'm very familiar with is Smiling Minds, which is free. And again, you can pick like a 5-minute meditation, and Smiling Minds is lovely for the kids as well. Headspace does some wonderful breathing exercises. There's also Calm and Zen. I'm not too sure if those ones are free, but they probably have a free trial. And those are really great. And the reason, again, is breathing, steadying our breath is what talks to this poor overwrought fellow over here and helps our brain to keep communicating with itself. Other things that are really useful that they use in these space stations, for example, is sitting near a window. Natural light is very, it enhances our mood, and being able to view natural scenes. Now, I don't know about you, I live in the suburbs, there's not a heck of a lot of natural scenery going around, but I have found just sitting near the window where I can hear a bit of bird song and just see the blue sky with some lovely fluffy white clouds out there today, definitely settles and soothes. If you don't have that option, if you're in an apartment and you stare at the apartment block across from you, a pot plant. Just having a lovely natural green pot plant, even that soothes and relaxes us. So we're actually, some of the research coming out is things like a 20-minute walk in nature is showing a significant improvement effect on mild to moderate depression. So important thing to incorporate. connecting to the world outside, even remotely. And for that, there's some really lovely initiatives on the go. So Safari Live and Wild Earth, you actually get to go in the safari vehicle with people in safari game parks around the African continent, and they chat to you, and you can interactively send questions and they answer your questions. And it's a lovely way of seeing the world out there, connecting with nature, but also being a part of other people and other community with similar interests. So, I mean, I just included that because I found that really lovely and have been losing many hours in an evening to going on virtual game drives. But I'm sure there's, if you've got other interests, there's other ways of doing that as well. But have a look on YouTube. There's lots of options out there. And then connecting with yourself. So it's really important to stay on top of what's going on for you so that you're able to act and take action before a problem arises. So something that they do with NASA astronauts is they have them track their emotional and physical symptoms every single day. And they actually have a weekly check-in with a psychiatrist. Now, you know, not all of us need to check in weekly with a psychiatrist, but that's the sense of keeping a track on what's your mood doing over time. A couple of odd days here and there, that's okay. But if it's on a trajectory downwards, then there's something there that needs to be addressed. Physical symptoms, what was your sleep like? What's your appetite like? Are you consistently eating less and you just don't feel hungry? Are you consistently eating more and you might be comfort eating? You know, all these are factors to keep track of, and a lovely free app to do that on and that I recommend quite often is Pixel. And I think that top picture is from Pixel. And that's a lovely, quick visual way to just see how am I tracking. If you're wanting to do something that has actual exercises and psychological structure and strategies for helping guide you through some difficulties, emotional difficulties you're experiencing at this time, then I'd recommend My Compass. They're actually an Australian app, and they are currently doing a trial with NASA to provide essentially psychological and therapeutic intervention to astronauts while they're in space. So it's a personalized self-help tool, kind of like a therapist in your pocket, if you will. For some of us, though, we're not going to be in a space where we can even do that for ourselves. Maybe we flipped our lid. Maybe we had already flipped our lid before this even began, and now we've got no spoons left. And in that case, please see your GP. You can see your GP through telehealth at the moment. You can get a mental health care plan through telehealth at the moment. And you are able, then you're eligible for up to 10 sessions in a calendar year with a psychologist. And I think, you know, this is not the time to be brave. No one's going to be getting medals for grinning and bearing it through this. This is the time that if you're struggling, if you're finding that you're flipping your lid more than usual and you're battling to come back to that relaxed state, reach out, get some help. If astronauts can do it and they can get therapeutic intervention once a week, and those are some pretty high functioning people, so can we. Okay. So then connecting with others is important too. So something that they do for all these people in these extreme isolated settings is helping them to connect with their normal life back home, to address that loneliness, to address that homesickness. So talking with people in real time, setting up a Zoom session with your friends, being able, even with your work colleagues, being able to feel that you're part of a team, you're part of something bigger. And maybe you have a Friday weekly wine Zoom session with your friends where you acknowledge and celebrate you've made it through another week. We're 1 week closer to this being over. And I'm hearing of some wonderful examples of people having a paint and wine evening where they all paint together and they hold up their paintings and have a good giggle. So people being really innovative about how to do this. Also, you know, joining a sports group or a yoga studio and working out together is another way to feel connected. Some things just to remember as well about those phone calls or those Zoom chats is manage people's expectations. So don't let it become another stress. You've got phone calls, meeting requests, so many things going on. Let people know when's a good time to connect, what suits you, to call. Manage the call content with your friends as well. Agree that, guys, maybe we're going to spend 10 minutes talking about Corona, and then we're going to talk about everything else. Or maybe just saying, I'm not up to talking about all that stuff, whatever it is, what's off limits for that day, so that you're not activating and stressing that emotional system. Also, use your mute options. You know, I don't know about you, but when I'm chatting to my parents back in South Africa and my house is particularly messy, I make sure they see a very small corner of my house, so that's their view of what they're going to see. You know, we can control who sees what and hears what about our lives. If my kids are having a squabble in the background, I just mute for a little while. So remembering that we have control over some things like that. And then another thing to do, if you're feeling up to it, and this is, you know, this is not something you have to go and do, but some people might be feeling like, oh, I really want to be connecting with others, I've got a bit more energy, I want to do something, then get involved in a volunteer opportunity. So I know that UQ was doing some volunteer work of handing out food parcels to students who are in quarantine. Another thing that I've seen is Meals on Wheels in Queensland. So suiting yourself up, packing meals for the elderly who are in confinement, and some people even dropping them off. And I think, you know, we know that giving something back definitely gives something to us. So just on a quick issue there, one of the key findings that comes out of those isolated, extreme environments is when you put confinement with added stress and more time together with the same group of people, conflict's inevitable. Okay, so it's something we're going to see. Our mental load is stressed out beyond its capacity. We're going to flip our lid a little bit more. We're going to take it out on those around us, and we're going to have some conflicts arise. So two really interesting, I suppose, ongoing experiments that space agencies do. One is HERA, where in a very isolated part of the world, they put people together for 45 days, and they study them and they work out what helped them to work better together, what led to conflict, and what can we learn about that. And then HI-SEAS is another example where they actually isolate people together for a year, 365 days, and they study what brings them together, what shatters them apart. And so I just wanted to share with you, as my last little bit here, a few key things on what can help with that conflict, because most of us are pretty much caged up with a few other people, and there's going to be trying times, or there already are trying times. So a key thing is self-restraint. Now, what that means is don't flip the lid. When we flip our lid, this guy's really primitive, and there's not a lot of self-restraint there. So what self-restraint in that word means is taking care of ourselves with our breathing, our walk around the neighborhood, our cuddling our pet, our taking a nap when we're feeling overwrought, keeping our nutrition up. All of that contributes to keeping the frontal cortex online and keeping us thinking logically, acting rationally, and demonstrating self-restraint. Another key tip that they do for these people who are stuck on space stations, for example, is identifying some area of personal space that you can retreat to when you're frustrated. And I really suggest set that up with the family before you need it, right? But being able to call a time out and say, look, I'm getting super frustrated. I can't deal with this right now. I'm going to go to my room. I'm going to close the door. I'm going to take 10 minutes. When I'm calm, I'm going to come back and we're going to resolve this. But I can't do it right now. I flip my lid. I can't even think of any solutions. So things like setting up your ground rules, your take time out will be a ground rule, and where you'll go when you're frustrated will be a ground rule. Another really important thing they do in these isolated situations is they agree that they will address issues before they become problems and cause further tension. And that's really challenging for a lot of us, because a lot of us have been able to kind of sweep some issues under the carpet because we've been able to go out for 8 or 9, 10, 12 hours a day. But that's less possible now. So having a family meeting or a housemate meeting and sitting down and saying, these are unusual times. We're going to have to be a little bit more forward and open with each other. Let's agree to have open and honest conversations about what's going on for us, what's bothering us, before it leads to further tension, because trust me, having those awkward conversations is so much easier than living in a hostile environment, and especially when you're stuck in that hostile environment. So sitting down with people and saying something like, I feel frustrated when the dishes in the sink aren't washed from the night before. I need the dishes in the sink to be cleaned up straight after the dinner meal. What can we do to resolve that? And then working on something like that. And that's just an example of, I know for me, one of my triggers is if I walk into a kitchen and it's a mess, then I feel like my whole head's a mess. So figuring that out, working on what needs to be done about it, and getting everybody aware of what's going on. So I just wanted to share with you, and this is something, an exercise that I really want you to encourage you to do today or this week. And I'd say today, strike while the iron is hot, while your mind is in this space. But essentially to be able to identify your needs, share them, and then find ways to meet each other's needs. Now, taking that example of the dishes in the sink, for example, I might just find that I completely flip my lid and I end up snappy and I stomp around the house and I'm very grumpy with everyone. And if I stop and I think about what was that about for me, right? And I gently trace that back to the need. What was the need inside me? The need was, I need order, especially when the world outside feels so disorganized. I need neatness. I need my den, my sanctuary, to feel like a sanctuary, not to feel like a further chaotic representation of life. Then I'm able to speak to the people around me and say, one of the things I really need is a tidy kitchen, not a tiny one, that would be worse, a tidy kitchen. Can we agree that whoever does the cooking, the other person does the washing up, and we do it before the next morning? And then we agree that that's what we're going to do. And I put another example in there of something else. But essentially, most relationship conflicts happen around an unmet, unidentified need. So I've put the steps there for an exercise, and you can do this with your housemates, you can do this with your partners, you can do this with your children, you can do this for yourself on your own, right? But think of something that makes you mad or sad or grumpy and trace it back to the unmet need. And then think about what can you do to meet the need that will head off and prevent it flipping out and going into that limbic and emotional fight, flight, freeze response, which then takes so much longer to soothe, and then we've got to repair relationships after that. So that's just a little exercise that I found really useful personally, and I use it with a lot of my clients, and I'd really recommend for you guys to do it. So essentially, the takeaway, I hope I've tried to make it clear that everything that I've suggested here is about how do we keep the wise leader, this guy, this frontal cortex, where the thinking, the problem solving, the logic, the practicality, how do I keep him in command so that I don't flip my lid? And I'm more than happy to share this presentation with Jackie, and Jackie, maybe you can put it up or make it available to everyone so that you've all got those steps and those strategies there. But those are just kind of a couple of key things that we've learned from other people in isolated situations that can be useful. So that's it for me. Time for any questions. Jackie, I don't know if you want to just let me know if there's any questions.
Thank you, Gillian. That's been really helpful. We do have a few questions.
Sure.
So one from Daniela.
Yes.
So what's the best way to integrate what we are learning now in these turbulent times when we get our freedom back? So obviously we'll all go through a lot of adaptations and changes to this world, and then we'll get our freedom back, I suppose. Have you got any tips on how to reintegrate all of our learnings and I guess maintain the importance of, you know, kindness and empathy and all those things that we're hopefully learning as a society in this strange time?
Absolutely. And I think that's something that, you know, adversity gives us an opportunity to change the way we do things, that we might not have been given that chance without it. That doesn't mean we have to be smiling and overjoyed at adversity, but generally we find humans are amazing at finding a way through things and finding meaning in what they go through. And so something that I would recommend is to be really conscious or intentional about to sit down and go, what is it that's come out of this that I might want to hold on to? So I'm happy to share a personal example of that. Something that I've noticed is I've loved spending more time at home and being less rushed, right? And one of the key things that I noticed is I was always kind of rushing from work to gym, home, dinner, kids, bed. And I have loved having gym taken away from me has meant that I've maybe been exercising a little bit less often, or we've been going for a family jog in the evening, maintaining social distancing from everybody else who's walking. And I've noticed that I've absolutely loved that extra bonding family time and that less of a sense of rush. So to kind of be able to hold on to that is, first of all, identify what is it I'm enjoying? What is it that's working for me? And then how does it make me feel? And then what actions, what specific things am I doing that is allowing it, or not doing that is allowing this thing to come about? And then looking into the future, when life returns to something akin to normality, what might I need to do to maintain that? So it might be a case of, okay, the gyms are going to reopen. Maybe I decide to go back 3 days a week. And maybe I take 2 rest days a week and spend that time with my kids. Or maybe we agree that for those 2 days a week, we go for a family walk or a family jog. So it's about that balance, but it comes from, first of all, noticing and being very clear and aware of what it is that's working and what I need to do to ring fence it and keep it safe when life starts to pick pace back up again.
Great, thanks, Gillian. Another question from Jennifer. I'm not sure how much we can cover it in this. You already gave some suggestions already, but what are some suggestions to give back, given our isolation and workloads? I know you mentioned sort of more volunteer opportunities and things.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you could add to that?
I can definitely have more of a look around. So I know definitely Meals on Wheels, but there's other organizations that you might want to get in contact with. There's a lovely place called A Place to Belong in West End, which is, I think, for youth experiencing homelessness. I can't think of anything else right off the top of my head, but I can certainly look more into that. The other one is, if you're not too keen on helping humans, which is okay, it's not everyone's cup of tea. I know the RSPCA and other animal welfare organizations have been saying, look, while we're stuck at home, this is a great time to foster a pet, to take a pet in temporarily and offer it an opportunity to become habituated to a home, to learn how to walk on a leash. And then it makes it far more likely that that animal will be adopted when things return to normal. So GAP, which I think is Greyhound Association, something, GAP Queensland, GAP, Gumtree Greys. Those are just some of the examples that I can think of off my head who have been saying we would really welcome people who might feel that they've got time and a space in their home and space in their heart. And they provide you with all the resources on how to help make these animals more adoptable.
Sounds lovely, thank you. And another question from Tina is, how can we be more involved with colleagues and friends who are living alone? So, you know, I guess keeping up those connections of our vulnerable.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think certainly in my practice, the ones that I'm really, of course I'm worried for all my patients, but the ones I'm really concerned for are the ones who are living alone and maybe had some social anxiety before and are less likely to reach out. So I think the key thing is take the initiative, you know, without kind of cornering a person, just saying, I would love to catch up with you this week. Can we agree to meet via Zoom for maybe a bottle of beer or wine or a cup of tea and snacks, and just catch up with each other. So actually making it concrete and saying to them which day would suit you, which evening, what time. So really sort of putting ourselves out there, checking on them via WhatsApp. You know, when you see something funny they might appreciate on social media, sending them a personal message with it in it. Just that general checking in taking the initiative, being the one to send those invitations. So much like you would have said, let's meet for coffee, if we were able to do that, there's nothing to stop you doing that on Zoom. I think there's even an app called the Party app. It's kind of like Party Zoom, where you can all hang out, and you can do it with a couple of friends. You know, you can also watch a video together and talk while you're watching that video. And I think Facebook has that application. So, but I think the key thing for those who are on their own is don't be shy to take the initiative. I have never met anyone who said, gee, I wish my friends didn't contact me and ask me how I was going.
Thank you so much, Gillian. I think everyone on here will agree with me to say that that's been really informative and really helpful. You know, I'm not sure if you've seen the chats, but everyone's very grateful for your expertise. So I am too. That's been a great session.
Great.
They're asking for follow-up, so I'll try and test the friendship shortly.
Yeah.
For those who are still with us, we do have some other sessions coming up. They're not on Eventbrite yet, but they will be shortly. One in a couple of weeks on, I guess, a bit more about self-compassion and being kind to ourselves, and another one from Dr. Stacey Parker looking at, I guess, managing the work-life kind of work from home, stuck at home balance. So there are a few more to come, and then I'll push the friendship with Gillian and see what else we can do for you all soon.
I'm more than happy to do a bit of a deeper dive into any one of those aspects that we overviewed today, or even if there's a particular sort of theme around what people are wanting, and that's something that I can offer some information on, then I'm more than happy to do that, Jackie.
Thank you, Gillian. And that goes for everyone online. If you want to send through to me, Jackie Dean, or to uqwellness@uq.edu.au. If anything you know is particularly pressing or you want to know more about, we'll see what we can do.
Lovely.
So enjoy your afternoon. As we said, there's a few of you going to sit on your decks and have your lunch now. So I hope it's a lovely afternoon for you all. And I wish you all the best. We'll be in touch soon.
Lovely. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye and thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Gillian. There was lots of really positive feedback, so I think that was really helpful and really informative.
Good. Yeah, like I said, if there's anything more that others will find useful, or I'm more than happy to contribute some more. It also helps me feel like I'm giving something as well.
Yeah, we so appreciate it. But now you can go let the dog out of the laundry. And,
she behaved quite well. She deserves a biscuit.
Yeah, that's it. Oh, well, she well deserved. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
All right, Jackie. Good to see you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.